Good morning and welcome back. We're working on authserver.net. Yesterday we set up our authorization code flow, but we don't have it completed yet. So for example, when I look at this, and we're going to go through the protocol just to make sure that that I hit everything, is that we get our client IDs and secrets. We do check to see if we have it in the course configuration, and then I don't do anything in here to validate that login at this time. So for example here, when we do the authorization, I get the authorization code, I check the course policy, and then I send them to the login screen. And then when they log in with resource owner, with this one, our token request includes the code. Let me look at this real quick because I'm failing to see where the unique identifier is coming from. It comes after it's been authenticated. So over here, my login view model, we're generating a username and a password. And then I'm doing this right here. So now what I want to do is I want to submit this . Let's just see what's happening here when this is running. I'm going to open up Postman. Okay, so this should kick me over to the login view on the authority server, and it does. And then when it jumps through here, I do have my username and password. Then I generate my authorization code. This is where I need to assign the user ID. So let's go ahead and add the user stuff in here. So right now I'm creating something with a user service, and I want to use the identity system. Let's look up ASP.NET Core 3.1 password hash. Well, I'm just trying to think because I really would rather use the user service, but authentication is provided. Oh, I don't have authentication in here, so I can use the user service. So let's go ahead and implement that. So here, underneath configure services, we're going to do a services.configure identity options. And up here above this one, we want to have a services.add default identity. Hey, great gamer, welcome back to the channel. How are you doing this morning? And that's the type of identity user, which is going to be an options.sign-in. Like that, and then we'll do a options.sign-in confirmed account equals true. So add default identity. Needs to be pulled from the namespaces extensions dependency injection. Okay, we're going to install this package here. I think it installed the wrong version. .NET 5, we want 3.10. Still doesn't want to find it. Well, we could just do it like that. Like that. Like that. And we're going to change this to be an application user. Which needs to be a identity user. And then in the application database context, it's an identity database context. So you can see users is already there as a generic, so we don't need that anymore. So when I look at this new application user, I want to say the username is liveordevtrying. The email is liveordevtrying@gmail.com. The ID, I don't think I have one because the ID is the name. Cool, the generic is working. The only thing I don't have is this password hash. I don't like all that. I want this one. Okay, so let's just start with that. Now my application user ID, what's the key on this? I think it's the username. T key, which is a string, which is the ID. Which means that on this project, this is a string. We'll rebuild it. Okay, we're going to delete the database here. So underneath migrations, I can get rid of this. And we can delete the database here. And we can do a add migration called init, and we can put the output directory to be data migrations. Okay, so I've got a problem here in my startup, which is add DB. Well, there's default identity. If I look back over here, right here, we want to do add default identity of the identity user. And then we want to say options.signin.required confirmed account equals true. And then I want to add entity framework stores of my application database context. Down here, I can scrap this stuff. And then above here, we want to do my app.use authentication. Try it again. So I only did the add migration. Now I want to do the update database. Perfect. It redirects me back. And there we go. And there's my token. So up here, where we're generating the auth code, I want to add in here a new protected read-only, and it is a user manager of type application user called user manager. So down here, well, you're doing it in the authenticate user, so let's do it over here. And what I want to do here is I want to look at my user manager, and I should have a see, add claims, add logins, change password, create, delete, find by login. Generate user token asynchronous. Get user asynchronous. Has password. Is enroll is locked out. Verify user token. So it looks like this thing does all my token management almost. Authenticator key. Interesting. Well, I'm not seeing what I wanted, which was like check password. That's what I want. So we're going to do a user manager.find my name for the username. And then this is the password. Perfect. So this is going to be get application user asynchronous. So we're going to do this right here as a application user. If there isn't a application user, and then down here we're going to generate the authorization code. We have something called a sign-in manager, which we don't need to worry about. So the thing I do want to see was on this user manager, we had these things with the this get new authentication token. This is not helpful at all. Here, this is what I wanted to see. How do you validate the token? Using a memory stream to do it. So is there a validate asynchronous? That's okay. So if we don't get this, now we're going to come down here to our generate authorization code. And when I look at this, we need to go to our data access layer. And I need to have a new function in here called public virtual asynchronous task called get authentication authorization code. Like that. And if I look at my authorization code, it's not attached to anything at the moment. So I know I want to attach it to a user. Like this. And we also need to have here a string for the application user ID. No, because we don't know that one. And if I look at my application database context, my model builder.entity of my authorization code has an index on the code, which is unique. And so all I want to do here is a return await context dot first or default, and this is going to be my authorization codes. That's a DB set. And we want to get the one where the code is equal to authorization code. Now, it's not quite that easy because I first need to add in the active flag, and I also want to say encoded authorization code equals, and it is a convert dot to base 64 string of my encoding dot utf8 dot get bytes of my authorization code. Hey, you have another one in here called public virtual asynchronous task of a authorization code called create authorization code asynchronous. And all we're going to do is DbContext.AuthorizationCodes.add authorization code return await if we're going to say await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0, then I want to return the authorization code. Otherwise, I want to return null. Yes, it is. I enjoy free bacon. How are you doing? Welcome to the channel. This is from scratch. And the GitHub for this is available up here. And that's because Identity Server 4 is becoming proprietary. So here, where I'm generating a refresh a token, where is that? Here. This one I want to do data access layer dot create authorization code, and it's a new authorization code, and we'll get the application user. The code is generate random token string. ID doesn't matter. The other ones don't matter. And now I want to say if my authorization code does not equal to null, then I want to return my authorization code dot code. Otherwise, I want to return null. This needs to be a application user ID. Now, when you do this, we want to do a await get authorization code of my and what I need to do is I need to say a var encoded code equals a convert dot to base 64 string of my encoding dot utf8 dot get bytes of the authorization code dot code. Like this, like that. We add the code, we save the changes, and then we get the code of the original. When we get it, we're encoding it. Yeah. And then this is my authorization code. And then I want to do my authorization code.code equals encoded equals your authorization code. And then you want to return authorization code. Yes, it is. This is open for others to use, others to build on top of, completely open source project. Okay, also when we do this, we have to make the other tokens not valid. So in authorization code, I can also look at my refresh token and I can copy some of the logic out of this. So we want to have a expires, a is expired, a created by IP, no revoked, no replaced by. We have is active, which is fine. So down here, created equals date time dot UTC now, expires equals date time dot UTC now dot add days, add minutes, and it says it only wants this valid for 15 minutes. So we're going to add a integer here for lifespan in minutes. We also want to have the string for the created by IP. And that's it. Okay, we need to have another one of these called public virtual asynchronous task of a bool called validate authorization code asynchronous. On here, when we create this, I want to say existing codes, authorization codes equals await my context dot where the application user ID is equal to the authorization code dot application user ID, and they are is not expired and it is active. And then you're going to do a for each var item and existing authorization codes. We're just going to do item dot active equals false. And then we're going to do a context dot authorization codes dot update my item. Yeah, if you look here on the new identity server for Git, they added this new note, which was as of October 1st, 2020, they started a new company. All future work will happen in this new Duende identity server, which is a different license. It's a commercial license, but testing and development is free. So for me, I've got a lot of applications built on top of identity servers, so I need to come up with a new solution. Okay. Where do you host your stuff? Azure? No, I use AWS. So down here, all I want to do is var return await data access layer dot get authorization code of the authorization code. When I look at this, I only want to get the one which is not expired. I already wrote that in. Yeah, right here. And then what I need to do, because you're only allowed to get it one time, is we're going to go entity.active equals false, and then we're going to do a context.authorization codes dot update my entity, and then I want to do a await context dot save changes asynchronous. So if this is greater than 0, then I want to return the entity. Otherwise, I want to return null. I use Azure B2C for my identity needs. Yeah, Azure's got a lot of cool stuff, like their identity. I guess AWS has it as well. I just haven't really dug into it. I've always used my own server. Anytime I couple with those big providers' services, it's hard to expand beyond them later. Like, for example, I was using RDS on AWS for the relational databases, and I can't get my data off. It's extremely challenging to get the data off and onto a server that I actually own. So it's things kind of like that. Yeah, any of those hosted services, they cost money. You get what you pay for, you know? So if this does not equal to null, that's all we're going to return. So over here, now we're going to generate an application token for this application user .id. My lifespan in minutes is 15. And my login is IP, which we can move to a base controller. Like that. Make it abstract. Make it inherit from a controller base or whatever it's supposed to be from, just a controller. We want to make this protected. And then we want this to be from base controller. And then from base controller. So over here I can pass in the IP address. Question: how do you handle someone malicious trying to use your auth for their apps or prevent? So that's where it gets really interesting, right? Because there's a couple of different ways. When you register a client on here, you have to register the issuer, which is who gives the token, and then the audience, which is who that token is for, right? And then also you have to register your resources in here. And so on your resource server, your audiences, you have to specify like which are the intended audiences. So the validation comes from that the clients, when they're registered, have a client ID and a client secret, which are maintained server to server side, ideally. And then when they request the token, the server is what's communicating here. The other way is with the audience and issuers, and then the validations for the issuer, audience, and the val signing key. So that's the most important thing, is that on the JWT, there's 3 pieces. I can't remember all 3, but the third one is a hash. It's a security key. And so I have a secret on my side, which is on both the resource servers as well as the identity servers. And so I do a validation of that issuer key to make sure that the JWT has integrity and has not been modified. Yes, that is symmetric key auth. That is correct. Why don't you upgrade to .NET 5? I'm using... I haven't upgraded to .NET 5 yet. I don't have a reason for it, but I need to. I don't know if it's supported in all of AWS yet, unless he's using Docker. I am using Docker for everything. So I really can upgrade to .NET 5. And so when this project is complete, I will also be doing a port over to .NET 5. Okay. So now when I look back at the guide here, for the authorization code, this is all fine. Up higher, there was something about the code itself. Refresh token, access token. Come on, where's my authorization token? Client password. What do you call endpoints? Authorization endpoint. Or response type. So where we get the token, the redirection URI includes an authorization code and any local state. So there it is. That's what it is. So the authorization code also needs to have on it a state and a redirect URI. OK. And down here, we also want to verify the redirect URI in the state. So in here where we create this now, we're going to say the state is equal to state. The redirect URI is equal to the redirect URI. And that's it. Down here, we want to get the one where we also have the string redirect URI and the string state. And where did we do the encoding? That was up here. In the where we're seeding the data. Oh, come on. I know it's not going to find it like that. Get encoded URL. So here we want to do a to-do need to encode the URI. So let me do a C# HTML encode. So do we have something called web utility .html encode? So up here, we'd say client dot audience URL equals HTML encode of the audience URL. The next one is the issuer URI. The next one is the that's it. And this is another web utility dot encode redirect URI. And you want to get the one where the code is the same, the redirect URI is the same as the encoded redirect URI, and the state is equal to the state. Which means that over here, We're going to change this index to be on code. Like that. And then we want to have another index, which is going to be false. And it's going to be on code, redirect URI, and state. Okay. You're still not encoding the state. Like that. And this is the original state. I'm going to say this is the encoded state. And then we want to set the other properties here. That one's fine. And let's just do it with the redirect URL as well. Okay. I wanted to add a public virtual asynchronous task of a create client cores origin called client cores origin. And all that's going to be is a context.client cores origins.add my client cores origin. If we're going to say return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0, then I want to return a public virtual asynchronous task called a get client cores origin of a GUID ID. This is a return await context dot client cores origins dot first or default x where my ID is equal to ID and it is active. Like that. We also want to have a update client CORS origin, and then a delete client CORS origin. So we're going to get the first or default one of the client CORS origins, where the ID equals ID and it is active. If my entity does not equal to null, then I want to say entity.active equals false, and then a context.clients CORS update my entity, and then we're going to do return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Otherwise, I want to return false. And this one's even easier. It's just a context.client CORS origins.update return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Okay, we want to do a public virtual asynchronous task of a bool called update client asynchronous. And again, it's just a context.clients.update my client return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. And then we also have one more, which is a delete client asynchronous. And all we're going to do is we want to get the clients in the first one where my x.id equals ID and it is active. If my client does not equal to null, then I want to do a client.active equals false, a context.update my client, which is under clients, and then a return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. In this one, we want to add a GUID for a string for the application user ID. That's a project. So we'll leave it like that for now. So we redirect to the login, which is here. We generate our token here by adding in the login view model dot redirect URL, the login view model dot state, and then the code. Okay, back over here when the code is received again, these are just little verifications I need to add in here. Now, I can take that authorization token so I don't have it yet. I need to look at my grant type. So if this is authorization code, now I want to get my and I want to do this in my JWT service. And we want to validate my authorization token, which is a this got sent over in the in this token request, authorization code. Code is what we want. So this comes from the query called code. We also have received the redirect URI. It doesn't have anything to do with state. Code in the token request. But state doesn't get sent over again. The authorization code is connected to a user and a client. Okay. So you don't pass state. You pass state back here to the login, to the redirect, and then down here, state. You don't need to include state. But I do need to include a GUID for the client ID. And when I look at the authorization code, it's going to be a combination of a client ID and an application ID. Which means this is going to have a number of these authorization codes. Your authorization code doesn't have a state on it anymore. And then you are passing client ID back. So here we can have a GUID for the client ID. Like that. Which means that in my application database context, this key needs to be for the x.application user ID, x.client ID, the code, and the redirect URI. You could also say the active flag for a compound key. So when we look at this now, we have a state on it. We have a username and a password. I don't see a client ID. We're going to add in here a string for the client ID. You really need to send your client ID here, right? Which means that over here on the home controller now you can pass in a string for the client ID. Like that. And then here I can go string client ID, and we can do a await data access layer dot get client asynchronous of my client ID. Like that. And just to verify that this is in fact what's happening, if I was to go to the monitor and log in, we'll log out, have it go through auth. If I look at what's in this, you can see we have our return URL, a response type, the client ID, the state, the redirect URL, the scope. So it's everything is included. which means we also want to have on here the scope, the response type, I've also got a redirect URL. So on this, we want to add in these properties here. We have another string called redirect URI. We have one here for client ID. We have one for scope. We have one for state. We have one for not. Like that. We also need to have a response type. You do want to have state here, state there. And then we get the auth code. Then it's going to send me to the return URL. So we need to add in these other parameters here. So we have the return URL is one thing, and the state is another. The redirect URL is another. The client ID is another. We're going to add another one here for scope. And we also need to include response type. Okay. Down here, we want this to be a string for the client ID. Whoa. Like that. So here we want to do a var client equals await get client asynchronous of my client ID. In this one, we want to get the client equals await get client asynchronous of my authorization code.client ID. So now this one's going to be the token request.client ID, the authorization code, and the redirect URL. So if this is not validated, then I want to return a bad request, which is going to say invalid authorization code. And otherwise, so we're going to call this exchange authorization code. Now, if this entity does not equal to null, then we want to do a return await and we want to inject a user manager into here. And we want to do a find by ID, my entity dot application user ID. And now up here, this is going to be my account that we retrieve. And if my account is equal to null, then we're going to do that. Otherwise, I want to pass in my account dot like that. And last one here is we're going to look at my login controller. We want to hide the return URL, the client ID, the state, the redirect URI, the scope, and the response type. Now, before we go any further, I need to delete the database. We'll do a add migration called the init. And we'll do an update database. Okay, we run it. We run the front end. It should redirect us over. Now we didn't pass in a return URL. Because instead of bouncing it back here, we could just bounce it back to this identity server. If I look at this one more time, well, it should bounce back over here. Just a second here. In my accounts controller, we do the redirection here. And we want to redirect to I guess just /login. Run the front end again. The return URL is just /login. Okay, it says access is denied because it couldn't get the application user liveordevtrying with a password of null. Oh, if I scrap the password temporarily, try it again. still got null. Username liveordevtrying. So that's an application users, and an ASP.NET users. It's there. So let me take a look here at how this is set up. Let's change that to be false. Try it again. User, get rid of that. And then where you injected that here. Manager of application user, that looks right. Okay, let's go back and delete the database. I got a data integrity issue here. That looks better. Redirect me here. Trying to get my application user. Still got a null. Because in your application database context, this needs to be application user. Okay, we try it again. We log in, we get the user, still null. I don't understand what the problem is here. I don't understand what its deal is here. Let's try it again. We're going to look for it by the email. Man, I do not know what is wrong with this. Let's take a look here, and we're going to look for identity ASP.NET Core can't find user. Says my normalized username probably needs to be changed, as well as the normalized email. So let's go back here, and we'll do a normalized username. And then we'll add in a normalized email. And we'll add that in. Try it again. That time it found it, so that was the problem. So let's go ahead and add this stuff back in. Add back in the password. Change this back to by name. It gets invoked here. I'm going to say login view model.password. Try it again. We get the application user. We check the password. It says null because it doesn't have a password. So just for now, we'll skip over the password check. We'll stop and rerun it. Okay, and we return the application user. We generate our code. Something didn't act like that, so let's try it again. Okay, so that was where it was failing. It's this. Yeah. If entity is equal to null or entity.isExpired is false, is true, then I want to return null. Try it again. That looks good. Okay, it redirected me back here with my code in my state. But for now, I want this redirection to take me to the redirect URI. it didn't exchange the token. We get the authorization code by first getting the client. We get the encoded code, which is Q, U, F. If I look in the database, the authorization code is AAF5B. So it's already been encoded. By the time it reached here. So that means that where that's being issued, here, you should be returning the code original. And then up here where you're getting it, let's try it again. F6. So now it says RJ. Now my entity says F6. It's because if this is greater than 0, then you want to do these two things and return your entity. Try that again. Whoops, I got two instances running. Let's try it again. Okay, now we're going to get the code. Didn't get it. So we go back up here. In the database, it is NUEY. (4438) login. Now, it wasn't able to get one because it's not marked as active. Just a second. So when you generate this code, this is what the problem is, this get authorization code. So I want to say bool mark inactive. So if you are to mark it inactive, then you want to do this. Like that. This one's going to be false. This one's going to be true. Try it again. We redirect. We get our application user, which is not null. Now I can get my application user, and then we can generate the token. And there it is. And if I was to take this over into the JWTD code, we can see we have a sub, the issued, the audience, and then our other claims. We have a number of other claims that we need to make sure get in here. So I want to take a look at the database. We have role claims. We have user claims. What are these user claims? Claim type and a claim value. Assuming I can have multiple values. I need to kind of take a look at how that is working on another one of these. So let me take a look over here for just a second at something in production. And see what it puts in those user claims. It's the claim types for that individual user. But that still doesn't tell me okay. So that's the basic flow, but what I don't like is the way the claims are set up. Because I feel like what I need is another model in here called a claim. Well, let's start with something called a scope, which is a base entity. And we'll put that in the table called scopes. And all we're going to have on this is a string for the name. We can actually just put that right on a client. We also want to have on here a GUID for the client ID and a client for the client. And we want to give this a number of scopes. And in this one, we want to give it an index here on the client scope. And it wants to be on the client ID and the name. And the active flag. No active flag. We'll just put this on the name. No, because we want to use it for searching, so we want that. If I was to look at another app real quick. The only hidden field it's showing is return URL. When we added in our scopes, so in the data access layer, let's go ahead and say public virtual asynchronous task of a client scope called get client scope of a GUID ID. We also want to get one called a get client scope of a string for the client ID and a string for the scope name. We want to have one which is called public virtual asynchronous task of a client scope array called get client scopes of a string for the client ID. I want to have a public virtual asynchronous task of a bool call of a client scope called a create client scope asynchronous. And then we have a virtual asynchronous task of a bool called update client scope asynchronous. And then finally we have a public virtual asynchronous task of a bool called delete client scope asynchronous. These, I think, are being just held in that return URL. So here I can do a return await context dot client scopes dot where my x.client ID is equal to client ID and it is active dot to list asynchronous. And you want to do a var client equals await get client asynchronous of my client ID like that. This one's just going to be a return await context.client scopes.first or default asynchronous x where my ID equals ID and it is active. This is this one here where we need to first get the client and then we want to get the first one where the client ID is equal to client dot ID and x dot name dot trim dot to lower is equal to scope name dot trim dot to lower, and it's active. Okay, this is for adding a key or scope. Return, we're going to do a context.clientScopes.add client scope. If await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0, then we want to do a return await get client scope asynchronous of my client scope.id. Otherwise, I want to return null. This one is just a context.clientsScopes.update my client scope. Return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. And the last one here is I want to do a var client scope equals await get client scope asynchronous of my ID. If my client scope does not equal to null, then I want to do a client scope.active equals false. Context.clientsScopes.update client scope. Return await context.save changes asynchronous is greater than 0. Otherwise, I want to return false. So up here, I want to get my scopes split. And now what I want to do is I want to get my scopes for my client.client ID. So for each var scope split and scopes split, if my scopes doesn't contain doesn't have anywhere my name.trim.toLower is equal to scope split.trim.toLower. Then we want to do this. And this is going to be called invalid scope. And here I want to say if scope split.length is less than or equal to 0, then I want to return this as well. So if we were to try this again, okay, I need to add a migration like that. And then we're going to start the client as well. Over here in the authorize, I think it just sent a 400 bad request. Because I don't have any scopes. And I want to do a where my string is null or white space of x dot to array. Try that again. Try it again. Killed everything. Try it one more time. Okay, so over here, we look. My split response code is code. My client is retrieved. My split scopes is 0, so it's going to fail. So in my home controller, if on my index I was to add in here a scope is OpenID or something like that. Try that again. So now we don't have that scope in the app. So if I was to add that into the context, and this is a client scope. And now we'll do a add migration, add database seed. And I'll do an update database. Now I can start it again. Here it is. get the login. And it generates the code for me. Now, over here on the token, where I'm generating this authorization code, what about up here where I'm generating the token? I want to include here a list of claims, right? Like that. And so on this, I think I can do a new dictionary of type string and object. And then I want to have a new dictionary item in there, which is going to be a scope. And then I want to make an array of my scopes. And I want to add one record in here like that. So I wonder if I can just cheat and do and then I can probably do this, which is what I had initially. I don't know. So now we want to do that same check. I can do it from the data access layer. This one. You don't pass scopes into the token? I thought you did. Nope. So instead of doing this, the scopes need to be here. So when you make this authorization code, you also want to have a public string called scopes. So you want to get two things from this. You want to get application user and you want to get a authorization code. Like that. Like that. and then scopes. So here in your login view model.scopes, scope, lowercase. It's going to be all the way over here at the end. Okay, now we need to do a add migration, added scopes. And we can do an update database. Now we can run it. And can run the client. Here we go, we get redirected to the authorization endpoint. You can see scope is OpenID. We get sent over here to the token endpoint. We receive back an application user and an authorization code. And then I generate the JWT. And if I come in here to the JWT decode site, now you can see that we have our scope. So we're getting a little bit closer. I see that we have a JTI and an IET. You see I have a sub. I don't have client ID. Let's add that one into the token. Okay, we start this one. We log in. Here's the JWT. And over in JWT decode, you can see I've added in the client ID. We have NBF and EXP. Issue is wrong. Audience is wrong. I don't have auth time. I don't have IDP. I do have scope. So we're getting closer. So now here we want to say if my client.redirect URL well, we need to check that here. So let's put this into the branch. And I'm going to say added identity system, and we'll commit that out. All right, and as for me, I'm going to take a break. I have an appointment that I need to go to, so I should be back around 3 p.m. today, Pacific Standard Time. If you have any questions, this is a great time to pop them into the chat. At our Discord, discord.pixelhorrorstudios.com. And also I put all these videos up at youtube.pixelhorrorstudios.com. Thanks for staying with me today, guys. Have a great rest of your day. See you later. Bye.